Q&A Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @Q&A Review, that is @CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@QNreview.com. That is INFORMATION or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the National of Friday, the 7th of March 2025, from the politics section. American democracy is under threat as Donald Trump marks 1 month. This article is by Stuart PM Mark McIntosh. At the cinema, a sequel can sometimes be far, far more horrific, shocking, and upsetting than the first flick. American polarized politics is looking eerily like a terrifying horror sequel. Candidate Donald Trump warned of retribution, making clear his desire for payback against those who crossed him. He would, he said, pardon supporters and punish critics. As president, Trump immediately delivered, granting more than 1,500 pardons for the January the 6th rioters who sought to stop the peaceful handover of power in 2021. Meanwhile, he removed security details from former officials, including Anthony Fauci, Mike Pompeo, General Mark Milley, and John Bolton. The message: if you are with Trump, he has your back. If you criticize him, your life could be in danger. Now the Trump 2 team are taking carefully planned steps to move from an elected government to an autocracy, with rules, laws, and norms tilted to make America first synonymous with Trump first. There are 5 elements in this elected autocratic coup against the U.S. state and democracy. A key first step is to attack and dismantle professional state structures and loyalty. Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, get it? Minions, have begun the destruction of the U.S. civil service, firing tens of thousands, threatening all 2 million plus workers with the sack. Some employees are choosing to leave, others will soldier on. The professional civil service esprit de corps all swear allegiance to the U.S. Constitution upon hiring, is being deconstructed. Officials in every ministry and agency are gone. No agency is immune. This is the terrorization and freezing of national state functions. Next, a budding American autocrat needs to change the balance of the scales of justice. Scores of Department of Justice, the DOJ, lawyers are out or have resigned. Until Trump 2, since Richard Nixon, the DOJ has been at arm's length from the White House, separate, impartial, the better to ensure fair application of the law. Not anymore. Attorney General Pam Bondi is reporting to the White House. This is a relationship of subservience and a danger to impartial justice. Meanwhile, Uber loyalist Kash Patel leads the FBI, ensuring its loyalty and goals shift Trumpward. Autocracies are pay-to-play marriages between the leader and the oligopolies. This requires the neutering of independent agencies. Thus, Trump too is moving to make sure no agency can regulate without the okay of the White House. If this happens, it will shatter effective oversight for the largest financial markets, banks, financial players, crypto, and digital firms in the world. Risk-taking will increase because CEOs will know their regulators are muzzled by a presidency opposed to oversight. Higher risk means higher profits. But what when there are failures? The taxpayers will bear it, as in 2008. Any prospective autocrat needs a compliant military that will do their bidding. So, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, fired Joint Chief of Staff C.Q. Brown, an alleged woke diversity hire. In addition, the removal of 3 judge advocate generals responsible for ensuring the military abides by the U.S. military code and international law suggests the government may be prepared to weaken adherence to the Geneva Conventions, as advocated by Hegseth in the past. By firing and hiring, Hegseth is pushing the military leadership to obey Trump first, even when their oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution demands otherwise. Finally, one more step is key to autocratic regime change: disputing and ignoring court rulings. Scores of cases are before U.S. federal courts dealing with every executive order and potentially illegal action of the Trump II administration. Rulings have already gone against the federal government, including 3 rulings on the freezing of development funds. Yet the cash is still frozen, despite the judge demanding action. Thus, the federal government is refusing to comply with a lawful ruling. President Trump has declared, echoing Napoleon, that if he is saving his country, he is not breaking the law. Vice President J.D. Vance has argued Trump should ignore adverse rulings. Courts rule, but they rely on the executive to abide by the judgments and enforce them. If the Supreme Court balks at legitimizing Trump's reach for a new American imperium, the president can disregard the judgment and launch a propaganda war against the court. This has happened before. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled school segregation was unconstitutional in Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. Yet segregation only began to end when President Dwight Eisenhower moved to enforce it in Little Rock, Arkansas, 3 years later. 1 month on from Trump's inauguration, American democracy is under threat. Will Trump succeed? It is too soon to say. But the foundations of American democracy are being undermined daily, and they could yet collapse with massive implications for the global order, peace, and economic stability. That article was by Stuart P.M. McIntosh. This is from the National of Friday, the 7th of March 2025, from the news section. EU leaders back new defence spending plans. This article is by Joe Scotting and read by Karen. EU leaders have backed new defence spending plans after the US signalled that Europe would have to fend for itself in future. Leaders from across the continent held emergency talks in Brussels on Thursday to explore new ways to beef up their own security and ensure Ukraine's security. This comes amid Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said talks between Ukraine and the US on ending the war will take place in Saudi Arabia next week. The 27 EU leaders signed off on a move to loosen budget restrictions so that willing EU countries can increase their military spending. They also urged the European Commission to explore new ways to facilitate significant defence spending at national level in all member states, a statement said. The EU's executive branch estimates that around 650 billion euros, £545.5 billion, could be freed up in this way. The leaders also took note of a Commission offer of a loan package worth €150 billion to buy new military equipment and invited EU headquarters staff to examine this proposal as a matter of urgency. This comes as the UK Treasury announced the first third of its £2.26 billion loan to Ukraine has been sent. The £752 million has been sent for the country to purchase military equipment. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a staunch supporter of US President Donald Trump and considered to be Russian President Vladimir Putin's closest ally in Europe, refused to endorse any part of the summit statement in favour of Ukraine. But all 26 other EU leaders approved the bloc's stance that there can be no negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine, and that the Europeans must be involved in any talks involving their security. The Europeans have so far been sidelined in the US-led negotiations with Russia. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, whose country holds the EU's rotating presidency, said that 3 years of war in Ukraine and new attitudes in Washington pose entirely new challenges for us, and Europe must take up this challenge, and it must win. We will arm ourselves faster, smarter, and more efficiently than Russia, Tusk said. The plan to loosen budget rules originated with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who oversees the EU's executive arm. Zelensky welcomed the plan and expressed hopes that some of it could be used to bolster Ukraine's own defence industry, which can produce weapons cheaper than elsewhere in Europe and closer to the battlefields where they are needed. We are very thankful that we are not alone, and these are not just words. We feel it. It is very important, Zelensky said. That article was by Joe Scotting. This is from The National of Friday the 7th of March 2025 from the Politics section. We need a strong, united front for women's equality. This article is by Maggie Chapman and read by Karen. This year's International Women's Day theme is For All Women and Girls. This is a call for celebration and also a call for action. With more than 3 billion of us globally, every woman has different stories to tell. Our backgrounds, cultures, family and community situations all contribute to our world views, as will our access to education and services, or whether we are born into poverty or wealth, disabled or able-bodied, cis or trans, gay or straight. Despite this vast diversity, there is much that gives us common cause, and a sense of unity that should transcend our differences. Wherever you look, it is women who bear the brunt of social injustice and economic inequality, and women who are hurting, and in many cases dying, as a result of this. International Women's Day is a chance to reflect on the achievements and successes of women, victories of past campaigners, the importance of equality, and how far we have come globally. Though a cause for celebration, this day is also a reminder that women are often united by a shared fear, a fear of rights being revoked, of violence and of prejudice. It is a time to reflect on all we have shared and the work that has been done to tackle these risks, not just in the present day, but over the course of centuries of shared struggle and experience. Yet, in many ways, it feels like we are going backwards, with hard-won rights now in retreat. New technologies and communication platforms have created spaces and channels for misogynistic abuse. Tech billionaires have been all too happy to cash in from handing global platforms and megaphones to some of the most awful people. In an era in which so much of our lives is spent in virtual spaces online, social media platforms are becoming increasingly hostile places for women and girls. I see it on my timeline every day. I can guarantee that when this article is shared, either by me or by the National, many of the comments made will be misogynistic bile. As vile as some of those comments will be, they will be a fraction of the poison that is being directed by these channels. The other side of this has been the radicalization of young men and boys who are bringing their attitudes with them into almost every workplace and school. Nearly half of teachers in Scotland say they have witnessed aggressive misogynistic behaviour in the classroom, with polls showing that 8 in 10 are concerned about the toxic influence of misogynistic influencers like Andrew Tate. It is the most marginalised women who are experiencing the worst of the rollback we are seeing. In the UK, it is mainly women who are impacted by the cruel 2-child benefit cap and attacks on basic social security, and women who are on the front line of the anti-migrant policies that have created such a hostile environment. It is generations of women who paid the highest price for years of Tory austerity. We must not fall for cynical attempts to divide and rule. When LGBTQIA+ people are being targeted, particularly in the anti-trans moral panic, it is empowering many of the exact same forces who would gladly remove reproductive rights and defund women's services in a heartbeat. With a rising tide of misogyny, both aggressive and covert, we need a strong, united front to resist. We should not allow ourselves to be antagonized into division or coerced into believing that our struggles differ. They do not. Patriarchy lives on in the way we expect women to conform to one presentation or idea, as well as how we make economic decisions, and the gendered expectations we have for women and men in all areas. So this International Women's Day, in the face of fear and threat and division, we can choose togetherness. I will be spending the day in Aberdeen with friends and strangers, celebrating our unity over division, our inclusive, intersectional diversity over conformity. We will be celebrating women's contributions to modern life and considering those who are still prohibited from going to school, working and expressing themselves without persecution. Human rights are never divisible. We can and must recognize the struggles we face as individuals without disregarding the struggles of others. Equality for women is not in contest with equality for queer, trans, racial, or disabled people. No matter how much parts of the billionaire-owned media will try to pit us against each other. In 1981, speaking on the need for solidarity between white women and women of color, Audre Lorde told the world, "I am not free, while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own." Those words should still resonate today. The struggles we fight here in Scotland are connected to the struggles being fought by women and girls all over the world. The plea for gender equality transcends borders, race, physical appearance, class, background. We have more in common than that which separates us. A better world for women is a better world for everyone, and we will not win that better world if we do not stand up for all women. That article was by Maggie Chapman.
From The National, Monday the 10th of March 2025. In politics, Anna Sarwar urged to speak out against Labour welfare cut plans. This article is written by Steph Braun. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar has been urged to take a stand against the £6 billion of social security cuts being planned by Rachel Reeves. It has been reported Labour could experience their biggest rebellion yet in the House of Commons over the proposals for the spring statement, but Sarwar has kept silent on the issue. It is understood Reeves plans to save several £billions by making austerity cuts to the welfare budget, with health-related benefits being targeted. Lorna Slater, co-leader of the Scottish Greens, highlighted how Sarwar pledged to voters ahead of the 2024 general election that there would be no austerity under Labour, and has called on him to come clean about whether he backs these cuts. Slater said, "I was standing on the same debate stage as Anna Sarwar when he promised no austerity under Labour. Surely this can't be what he has in mind." Anna Sarwar represents some of the most deprived parts of Scotland and some of the people who will suffer the most. Did he know about these cuts, or were they also news to him? We were told that Scottish Labour MPs would speak up for Scotland. So will they stand by the promises that their leader made to communities and end austerity? Whether it is the assault on social security or the brutal cuts to international aid, it is the people with the least who will be hurt the most by a Labour government that is going even further than the Tories. If they opt for inaction and refuse to take a stand, then the human consequences will be severe. People will be hurt, and in some cases, people could die because of these decisions. The rumoured cuts to welfare come after Labour announced a cut to the foreign aid budget to fund an increase in defence spending. The foreign aid budget will be slashed from 0.5% of gross national income, GNI, to 0.3% in 2027 to boost military spending to 2.6% of gross domestic product by 2027. Bond, a membership organisation for charities working in international development, said it means by 2027 the aid budget will have been slashed by around £12 billion since the initial Tory cut from 0.7% of GNI to 0.5%. Slater said the UK government should have considered introducing a wealth tax to avoid some of these cuts to welfare and international aid. She said there is more than enough money in the UK to end these cuts and ensure that everyone can live well, but so much of it is in the hands of a small number of wealthy people. By introducing a wealth tax, Labour could stop these cuts, remove the cruel two-child benefit cap, and build a fairer and greener society. The fact that they are happy to punch down like this instead tells us a lot about their values. First Minister John Swinney said he was troubled by the reports of cuts to welfare spending, while SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn said the cuts would be deeply damaging for Scotland and that it would break yet another election promise. The reports of the planned cuts by the Chancellor follow the Office of Budget Responsibility, OBR, indication that Reeves had £9.9 billion of headroom back in October. But new forecasts are set to reveal that this has disappeared, owing to weaker than expected economic growth and a sharp rise in government borrowing costs. And that article was written by Steph Braun. From The National, Monday the 10th of March, 2025. From politics, protesters gather as King Charles attends Commonwealth Day service. This article is written by Steph Braun. Protests have been held in London as the royal family attend the Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey. Senior members of the family have gathered for the annual celebration of the global Family of Nations. But Republican campaigners and those standing against the political and moral stance of some of the nations of the Commonwealth have been making their voices heard in the UK capital. Anti-monarchy group Republic has said the Commonwealth event is particularly poignant as the first big royal event of the year and at a time when Commonwealth nations are planning to ditch the monarchy. Supporters of Republic have been pictured holding "Not My King" signs alongside a 15-foot dinosaur puppet named Chuck the Rex. Chuck is a new protest prop from Republic that symbolises the antiquated monarchy and is set to appear at protests throughout the year. Protesters have also been demanding an end to the Duchy of Lancaster and Duchy of Cornwall. The two estates have been accused of profiting from charities and public services while handing huge incomes to King Charles and Prince William. And again, this article was written by Steph Braun. From The National, Monday the 10th of March 2025. From Politics, SNP Minister undergoing cancer treatment to stand down in 2026. This article is written by James Walker. An SNP minister has become the latest SNP MSP to confirm she will stand down next year. Christina McKelvey took medical leave from her role as Drugs and Alcohol Minister in August last year as she undergoes breast cancer treatment. The MSP for Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse said it was the honour of my life to represent her constituents, but she will not seek re-election to Holyrood in 2026 so that she can focus on my health and my family. McKelvey was first elected in 2007 on the Central Scotland regional list, before winning the constituency in 2011, and has held junior ministerial posts for equalities and culture, as well as her current role. After her announcement she would take medical leave, the job was absorbed by Health Secretary Neil Gray and Public Health Minister Jenny Minto. McKelvey spoke of her pride of her work as an SNP and minister, highlighting her work on Clare's Law, which allows people to find out if their partner has a history of domestic violence. The privilege of being an SNP allowed me to also use my platform to boost the work of others, she said. For many years, I sponsored the Wear It Pink event at the Scottish Parliament in support of Breast Cancer Now. I have now experienced the invaluable support provided by Breast Cancer Now, the Maggie's Centre, and other organisations firsthand while going through my own treatment for breast cancer. My current treatment has made me realise that whilst I would love to serve my constituents and the SNP for another 5 years, it is time to focus on my health and my family. I am so immensely grateful to my family, staff team, SNP members, and most of all to my constituents who have put their faith in me time and time again. I will always campaign for the SNP and the cause of Scottish independence, and look forward to supporting the next SNP candidate for Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, who I have no doubt will carry on delivering for the people who live and work here. And that article was written by James Walker.
From The National, Monday the 10th of March 2025, from the Culture section. Popular pizza chain to open its first restaurant in Scotland. Report by Joe Scotting. A popular restaurant chain is set to open the doors of a new pizzeria in Scotland for the first time. Pizza Pilgrims, which first launched in 2012, is set to bring its take on Neapolitan-style pizza to Edinburgh. The large venue spans 2 floors, covering 4,349 square feet. The layout is designed to capture the bustling energy of the streets of Napoli, with bold, colourful interiors. The venue is the largest for the company outside of London. The location boasts 191 covers in total, including a 45-seat outdoor terrace, as well as an open kitchen where guests can watch their pizzas getting made. The new restaurant will also offer hands-on pizza masterclasses, private dining and pub quizzes. There will also be a stage for live music, comedy nights and even drag shows. The new opening will create 35 new jobs in Scotland's capital across front and back of house. The team will be led by Robert Turnbull, General Manager, who has over 25 years of strong hospitality experience. Founders Tom and James Elliott said of the launch, "We couldn't be more excited to finally bring Pizza Pilgrims to Edinburgh. This is our largest opening outside of London, with a space that can do it all. From pizza masterclasses, private events, group dining and a stage, we want to support Edinburgh's thriving entertainment scene. Pizza Pralgin's Neapolitan pizzas are made with the brand's 72-hour double fermented dough, according to the company. All ingredients are sourced from Italy. This includes flour from Naples and mozzarella from Napoli. The new Rose Street store will be open on April 14th. Pizza Pilgrims will be running a soft launch week from April the 7th, offering 50% off food and drink and giving away 1,000 free slices on Thursday the 10th of April, starting from 12 p.m. In an article written by Joe Scotting.
From the National, Tuesday the 11th of March 2025. News section. DWP benefits crackdown doomed to fail, warns senior Labour figure. By Laura Pollock, multimedia journalists. Plans to crack down on disability benefits are doomed to fail and could spark a backlash similar to Labour's decision to cut winter fuel payments, a senior Blair-era party figure has warned. John McTiernan told the paper that the UK government was foolishly and dangerously confusing the categories of long-term sickness and disability. The UK government is reportedly set to introduce a sweeping range of social security reforms in a bid to slash $6 billion off the benefits bill. The Department for Work and Pensions has drawn up a raft of measures to force people into work, even if they have extreme disabilities. Labour MPs have said a rumoured revolt is not limited to the left wing of the party, but party whips are sceptical of suggestions that as many as 80 MPs may turn on Keir Starmer. During a parliamentary Labour Party meeting on Monday night, Starmer warned his MPs that the government would not shrug our shoulders and look away from problems in the welfare system and elsewhere amid backbench concerns over expected reforms. The Prime Minister said he was not afraid to take the big decisions to fix what is broken. Loud cheers and table banging were heard from outside the closed doors gathering in Westminster, though some MPs have expressed fears of cuts to the benefits bill in the spring statement. Speaking at the meeting, Starmer said, "We've found ourselves in a worst of all worlds situation, with the wrong incentives, disencouraging people from working, the taxpayer funding a spiralling £70 billion a year bill by 2030. A wasted generation, 1 in 8 young people not in education, unemployment or training, and the people who really need that safety net still not always getting the dignity they deserve." Rachel Reeves will deliver her spring statement on March the 26th in response to the latest forecast from the budget watchdog. With increased borrowing costs and weak economic growth likely to require spending cuts in order to meet her commitments on managing the future finances. Covering the cost of welfare is expected to be among moves to contribute to savings. However, McTiernan, who was a UK special advisor when Tony Blair was forced to U-turn on plans to check up on disabled welfare claimants in 2001, said the government risked repeating the failure. He said, "The one lobby that defeated Tony Blair's welfare reforms wasn't lone parents. Their cut went through despite a massive rebellion. It was disability cuts, which were ditched once they were floated. The disability lobby is massive and influential because disability itself is distributed widely across the country." McTiernan added, "Labour tested the public's patience when it took winter fuel payments from 10 million pensioners without any warning. It risks losing support for the benefits cuts it's trialling." Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall has previously said there are 2.8 million people not in work due to ill health, 1 in 8 young people not in education, training or employment. The sickness and disability bill for working age people has risen by £20 billion since the pandemic and is forecast to hit £70 billion over the next 5 years. She said an upcoming health and disability green paper will set out plans to support those who can work back into jobs, rather than write them off. 16 major charities have written a letter to Reeves urging her to safeguard the rights of disabled people and argued cutting disability benefits would have a catastrophic impact. The Prime Minister's official spokesman said, "We want to restore trust and fairness in the system to ensure disabled people are better supported by the state to live more independent lives, and there will and should always be a safety net for those who need it most. And we'll work closely with disabled people and disabled people's organisations as we bring forward these reforms to ensure their voices shape our proposals." That article was by Laura Pollock. From the National, Tuesday, the 11th of March 2025, news section. Stephen Flynn calls on Scots to donate to urgent Gaza fundraiser, by James Walker, political reporter. Stephen Flynn has backed the Nationals' campaign to raise funds for vital aid in Gaza and the wider region. The SNP Westminster leader gave his support to our Medical Aid for Palestine fundraiser, which is aiming to raise £50,000 this week. It comes as Gaza's healthcare system is barely surviving, and according to the British Red Cross, the collapsed health system and its consequences could kill more people than the conflict itself. With only 16 of Gaza's 36 hospitals operational and just 1,822 hospital beds available, according to the World Health Organization. The collective punishment of the civilian population in Gaza is something that we're all sadly too familiar with right now, Flynn said. The SNP Westminster leader added, "The wanton death and injury to women, men and children for actions they didn't commit, the complete destruction of buildings and infrastructure, the denial of access to life-saving food, water, medicines and of course electricity, which is once again happening here and now." Flynn went on, "There's never been a more important time to back the people of Palestine and their attempts for survival and their attempts for peace. So please, if you can support the campaign to raise funds for medical aid for Palestine, if you have a few coins in your pocket, please make sure to consider donating to this campaign. So the people of Palestine are in no doubt that Scotland stands with them, be that in Gaza or indeed in the occupied West Bank. All money goes directly to this important charity, which is on the ground providing urgently needed medical aid and mental health support in Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Lebanon." That article was by James Walker. From the National, Tuesday, the 11th of March 2025, news section. More than 1,000 Inverclyde streets could see the speed limit cut to 20 miles per hour. By Norman Sylvester and Isla Robertson. More than 1,000 streets across Inverclyde could be converted into 20-mile-an-hour zones at a cost of more than £600,000. Members of Inverclyde Council's Environment and Regeneration Committee will be asked on Thursday to consider a report on 20-mile-an-hour zones. This would depend on Scottish Government funding before becoming a reality. The report states that no fewer than 1,054 roads across the area, which currently have a 30-mile-an-hour limit, could be suitable for a cut to 20. A 2-year period timetable has already been set out, including a public consultation period at a total cost of £651,500. If approved, work could begin in November, with the 20-mile-an-hour signs up and running by February 2027. It's estimated that the signs alone for the new 1,054 lower speed zones would cost around £442,000. Conservative councillor Graham Brooks hit out at the idea, saying, "I'm very disappointed that we are proposing to spend £651,500 on the implementation of unnecessary restrictions on constituents yet again. This is a ridiculous waste of taxpayers' money. Let's put the money back in people's pockets and stop doing ridiculous projects." In contrast, the committee's convener, Labour councillor Michael McCormick, said any scheme resulting in roads being safer for pedestrians and especially children should be welcomed. The main issue will be how the proposals are funded. Discussions are ongoing with council officers and Transport Scotland to find a way forward. On one of Inverclyde's existing 20-mile-an-hour zones, Kempock Street, Derek Cardiff, owner of Kempock Cleaners, gave his thoughts to the Greenock Telegraph. Cardiff said, "I think it would be a great idea. Not so much for streets like Kempog Street, but definitely the little side streets which lead to more residential areas. I live in Gurrock and have to drive up Victoria Road, and people drive along there at 50 miles an hour. I think reducing roads like that to 20 would be brilliant. When asked if he thinks drivers in Kempog Street comply with the 20-mile-an-hour limit, Derek said, "I know they do not. Because of the congestion here, the traffic is usually quite slow, but when it's not congested, cars go past rather fast. When I look out the window from my shop, you can clearly see people driving at 30 miles an hour. Even on this road, I know it's a 20 limit, but could benefit from going down to 15 miles an hour." The report by Eddie Montgomery, Inverclyde's Council's head of physical assets, says the need for further 20-mile-an-hour restrictions was first identified 2 years ago. Road safety experts claim that people are 7 times more likely to die when hit by a vehicle travelling at 30 miles an hour rather than 20. Transport Scotland say they're considering 20-mile-an-hour zones on parts of the A78 to Inverclyde. Those are the Bullock Street to just west of South Street roundabout, from east of 119 Inverkip Road to west of Neil Street, and from a point north of Weems Bay Railway Station access point to south of 82 Shore Street in Skelmony. But Inverclyde Council officials have suggested extending those by having 20-mile-an-hour zones covering the whole stretch of the A78 from the Bullring roundabout to Inverclyde Academy, and an additional stretch in Weems Bay from the Co-op store to St Joseph's and St Patrick's Church. That article was by Norman Sylvester and Isla Robertson. From the National, Tuesday, the 11th of March, 2025. News section. Shock as Alex Salmond died without leaving a will. By Laura Pollock, multimedia journalist. The former First Minister of Scotland died without leaving a will, according to reports. Alex Salmond died aged 69 following a suspected heart attack after making a speech in North Macedonia last year. His death came unexpectedly. Now his wife of more than 4 decades, Maura McGlashan, has said to be left without a will. A source close to the Salmond family has told The Times there's concern about the impact of the late SNP leader's 87-year-old widow, adding, "There was shock among the family when it became clear that Alex hadn't left a will." While details of Salmond's full estate are unclear, the couple, who did not have any children, owned their home in Aberdeenshire. He also had 5 separate pensions which covered his work as a civil servant, a Royal Bank of Scotland economist, as well as an MP and MSP. Salmond and Alba Chair Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh also co-owned Sláinte Media, which filings in February 2023 show there was £310,786 in shareholder funds. A source said, "You might expect someone approaching 70 to have their affairs in order, but it shows how focused on the future Alex was. Luckily they are a close family, because there would be no surprise if there was a fight over the inheritance, especially when his nieces and nephews won't be entitled to anything, but really might have expected to be left, at least, a minding if there was a will." An Alba Party figure said, "The family are sorting things out. You don't have to have a will in Scotland." If someone in Scotland dies without a will, their spouse can inherit up to £473,000 from the value of the house, £29,000 for the furniture, and up to £89,000 in cash as part of prior rights. Their spouse is also eligible to receive another further 50% of assets under legal rights. Any remaining money falls under free estate. It's then shared among the deceased siblings. A recent change in Scots law prioritises spouses over siblings. That article was by Laura Pollock.
This is from The National on Tuesday the 11th of March 2025, from the comments section. There is no moral duty to punish disabled people. This article is by Shona Craven. You almost have to feel sorry for Anas Sarwar. every time you think the UK Labour Party has paused its campaign of turbocharged austerity, another move comes along that's even harder to defend than the last. 5 Scottish Labour MPs have signed up to their party's Get Britain Working group, apparently throwing their support behind plans to cut up to $6 billion from the benefits bill. Did they not read Sarwar's lips before the election last July? Something's been lost in translation if they thought cutting personal independence payments for disabled people was part of the policy platform on which they were standing. Along with 31 other Labour colleagues, Graham Downey, Blair McDougall, Frank McNally, Gregor Poynton and Joni Reid have written a letter to Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall declaring the welfare system broken and saying that reforming it is both necessary and a truly progressive endeavour. Indeed, they believe they have a moral duty to remove barriers to sick and disabled people finding work. One suspects the main barrier they have identified is the subsistence-level financial support the most disadvantaged, economically inactive people in the UK receive. This acts as a barrier to seeking employment in much the same way that a pair of crutches acts as a barrier to walking unaided. Removing either when the end goal is clearly unachievable, certainly not progressive, is despicable. Perhaps the Get Britain Working Group have some bright ideas for creating large numbers of new jobs that disabled people with large gaps in their CVs have a fighting chance of securing. It certainly doesn't help that more than 300,000 small businesses are planning job cuts following April's hike in employers' national insurance, announced in the autumn. In the last quarter of 2024, there were around 800,000 vacancies in the UK and 1.5 million unemployed people looking for work. An additional 1.9 million economically inactive people would like to work, but are not currently seeking it due to their health problems. By the end of last year, the average number of applications per vacancy was close to 50, a staggering year-on-year increase of nearly 300% that some analysts have attributed to the use of AI. Businesses are unlikely to appreciate a further doubling of that number if a new duty to engage requires everyone on incapacity benefit to start applying for roles they would not cope with. Of course, Chancellor Rachel Reeves will find a positive way to spin any progressive reforms that are announced in the upcoming spring statement. But we already know Kendall believes some on sickness and disability benefits are taking the mickey. Does she have a plan to identify which ones? Or is the idea to withdraw support from them all and declare all those who are still alive a year later to be frauds? There are serious questions to ask about why the UK has struggled to recover from the pandemic and now has one of the highest levels of sickness benefits claimants in Europe. The Times attempted to get to the bottom of this in an article by its data editor, Tom Calver, headlined, "Have people stopped working because benefits are too generous?" The short answer was no, but the detail provided some clues. Calver found that while a quarter of the British public believe unemployed people receive too much in benefits, in reality, the UK lags behind most rich countries in terms of such support, especially when looking at the first year or two after an individual loses a job. By contrast, UK levels of support for sick and disabled people are more in line with the international norm, but half of the public think they are too low. Of course, COVID had a huge impact on the physical and mental health of our population, but the same can be said for other countries that are not now facing spiralling sickness benefits bills. One explanation offered by the Institute for Fiscal Studies is that people in the UK with health problems may be comparatively more motivated to apply for health-related benefits following the shock of a drastic reduction in income due to unemployment and having to meet stringent demands even to qualify for that pittance. Whether this counts as mickey-taking is perhaps up for debate. The authors stop short of suggesting that the process of engaging with the Department for Work and Pensions, being grilled, demeaned, threatened with sanctions, and forced to apply for jobs for 35 hours per week, regardless of their suitability, might itself actually make people sick or worsen pre-existing conditions. Few would disagree with Get Britain Working when they say we cannot abandon those facing illness, increasingly often at a young age, to a life without opportunity or hope. But surely no one believes Labour have come up with a credible, long-term solution to the problem of growing economic inactivity in the UK. The planned benefit cuts are a panic move by a Chancellor whose left hand and right hand seem to be entirely disconnected. If this is her idea of progress, what further horrors will come next? And that article was written by Shona Craven and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 11th of March 2025 from the comments section. We're on the ground in Gaza. This is why we need your help. This article is by Fikr Shaltut, the Gaza director at Medical Aid for Palestinians. The temporary ceasefire in Gaza has brought a welcome but fragile respite for the 2 million Palestinians who have endured relentless Israeli military violence over 15 months. But for the people of Gaza, this is not peace. It is merely a pause in the suffering. The destruction wrought by Israel's military offensive is everywhere, in the rubble of homes, in the targeted and destroyed health system, and in the eyes of children who can remember no time but war. This temporary ceasefire has offered Palestinians a chance to breathe, to mourn, and to dare to consider beginning the long, painful process of rebuilding. But even this small respite is under threat. On March 2nd, Israel announced a total blockade on aid, a cruel reminder that Israel's control and siege of Gaza is far from over. Without immediate and sustained international action, this temporary ceasefire may well collapse, and Palestinians will be plunged back into despair, starvation, and fear. As a Palestinian, I have seen too many ceasefires come and go. Each one brings a flicker of hope, but hope is not enough. What Gaza needs now is justice, accountability, and an end to Israel's illegal blockade that has suffocated the population for years. Over 15 months, Israel's military bombardment has left Gaza's health system in ruins. Healthcare workers have been targeted and killed, and doctors have been arrested. Hospitals are once again running out of medicines, diseases are spreading, and children are dying from hypothermia. Israel's total blockade will only deepen the humanitarian and health crisis, stripping the means of survival from 2 million people. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. Israeli military and settler violence has significantly escalated, and an ongoing Israeli military assault in the northern West Bank is the longest offensive in 2 decades. Tanks have been deployed in civilian areas. In Jenin, Tulkarem and Tubas, 40,000 people have been displaced from their homes and told they cannot return. Israel's military violence is not confined to Gaza. It is part of wider actions to erase Palestinians from their land. Despite the tightened blockade, we at Medical Aid for Palestinians continue to provide a lifeline to those in need. Our team is working tirelessly to deliver essential medical and humanitarian services. We are operating medical points across Gaza, providing antenatal care, treating communicable diseases, and offering rehabilitation for people with disabilities. We are screening for malnutrition and distributing food and supplements. We are providing mental health support to survivors of violence, detention and displacement, with a focus on women and children. And we are trucking water to areas cut off from supplies, rehabilitating waterworks and ensuring that hospitals have the resources they need to function. We have deployed emergency medical teams to treat injuries and infections, and they have conducted thousands of consultations and performed life-saving surgeries. The scale of the health and humanitarian crisis is overwhelming, and the blockade makes our work even harder. But MAP remains in Gaza. We have not lost hope. We are standing steadfast, but we need the world to stand with us, to demand justice, and to help us rebuild the health system. Your support can make a life-saving difference. It can help us provide essential medical care, conduct life-saving surgeries, and support mental health services for survivors of trauma. It can help us rehabilitate damaged health facilities and restore critical services. But more than that, your support is a statement of solidarity. It's a reminder to the people of Gaza that they are not alone and that the world has not forgotten them. The temporary ceasefire is a chance to save lives, but it's also a chance to demand justice. Israel's military occupation, blockade, and violations of international law must end. The international community must take decisive action to hold Israel accountable and ensure that Palestinians can live in freedom and dignity. This means suspending arms sales to Israel, supporting international accountability mechanisms, and ensuring unrestricted access for humanitarian aid. It means ending the blockade and allowing Gaza to rebuild. The people of Gaza have endured too much for too long. They need more than temporary respites. They need freedom, justice, and the chance to rebuild their lives. Now is the time to act. Now is the time to stand with the Palestinians in Gaza. To donate, go to map.org, that's map.org.uk. And that article was written by Flicker Shaltut, the Gaza Director at Medical Aid for Palestinians, and read by Lynn McNeil.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 12th of March. Call for Holyrood pension scheme to divest from Elon Musk's Tesla. An exclusive article written by Steph Braun. An MSP has raised concerns about the Scottish Parliamentary Pension Scheme's investments in Tesla amid the global backlash against its owner Elon Musk. Green MSP Mark Ruskell has written to the Chair of the Board of Trustees, Pauline McNeill, to urge trustees to actively divest from any Tesla Incorporated stocks managed by external fund manager Baillie Gifford. Mr Musk, who also owns the X social media platform, has attracted global outrage in recent months after endorsing the likes of far-right political actor Tommy Robinson. He was also seen making what was deemed by some to be a Heil Hitler salute during United States President Donald Trump's inauguration in front of 20,000 people. Mr Ruskell says that he believes that the toxicity of Mr Musk and by association Tesla contravenes the fund's statement of investment principles. He wrote, "I'm writing as a member of the Scottish Parliamentary Pension Scheme, or SPPS, and as a former trustee, to raise a concern about pension fund investments in Tesla Incorporated. As I'm sure you're aware, there has been a significant and growing global backlash against the actions of Elon Musk. In particular, the alleged normalisation of misinformation and extremism and his endorsement of far-right political actors, including Tommy Robinson, have raised significant ethical concerns. As a result of this and Mr Musk's actions as an unelected member of the United States Trump administration, sales of Tesla cars have plummeted across Europe, calling into question the financial wisdom of continued investments in this company. Public money should be used for the public good. While electric vehicles remain a strong global market to invest in, I believe that the toxicity of Mr Musk and by association Tesla Incorporated contravenes our agreed statement of investment principles. As a member of the SPPS, I urge trustees to actively divest from any Tesla Incorporated stocks managed by Baillie Gifford on our behalf." Reports this week have confirmed that shares in the electric car firm Tesla fell by more than 15%. However, stock analysts said that the main reason for the poor performance of the shares was fear about Tesla meeting production targets and a drop in sales over the past year. Mr. Ruskell added, "Where we put our money matters, and it sends an important message. The Scottish Parliament should be leading the way and supporting the kind of companies and people that are making our world a better place, not backing Elon Musk or his businesses. Electric vehicles are important and are a perfectly valid market to invest in, but if we're to reject the toxicity of Elon Musk, then we can't be funding his work or his companies. There is a growing global backlash against Mr. Musk and the hateful politics he represents, and our Parliament should be part of it." A Scottish Parliament spokesperson said Baillie Gifford invests parliamentary pension contributions in pooled funds, where the Scottish Parliamentary Pension Scheme is only one of a number of investors. Under this arrangement, the SPPS does not directly own any stocks, nor can the fund trustees direct where individual investments are made. An exclusive article written by Steph Braun. The National Politics on Wednesday the 12th of March. Nicola Sturgeon announces her decision to quit Holyrood after 27 years. An article written by Xander Elliots. Nicola Sturgeon has confirmed that she will not be standing for election in 2026. The former First Minister said that she would be stepping down as an MSP at the next Holyrood elections in a post on Instagram on Wednesday. A former SNP leader, Miss Sturgeon has been in the Edinburgh Parliament since it was reconvened in 1999. In a statement announcing her resignation as an MSP, Miss Sturgeon said that she hoped to contribute in different ways to making Scottish independence a reality. The MSP said that being one of the original 1999 members of the Scottish Parliament, serving for 27 years, almost exactly half my life, and getting to represent Glasgow's South Side, the best constituency in Scotland, has been an honour beyond words. She went on, "I have known in my heart for a while that the time is right for me to embrace different opportunities in a new chapter of my life. I've therefore written this morning to SNP members in my constituency, informing them that I will not be seeking selection for next year's Holyrood election. To my constituents, past and present, thank you for the trust you have placed in me. Being your MSP has been my privilege, and I will continue to represent you to the best of my abilities until I step down next year. To Southside SNP members, your support, loyalty and friendship through thick and thin has meant more to me than you will ever know. You are the best of the best. To SNP members across the country, I may be leaving Parliament, but I will be by your side every step of the way as we complete our journey to independence." Miss Sturgeon was the longest-serving First Minister in Scottish history, holding the top job since taking over from her mentor Alex Salmond, following the loss of the independence referendum in 2014. During her time in charge, she led the country's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and was responsible for setting up Scotland's devolved benefits agency. She shocked the political world in early 2023 by announcing that she planned to stand down from the top job. Within months of her announcement, her husband and former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell was arrested in relation to a police probe into the SNP's finances. He was later re-arrested and charged in connection with the alleged embezzlement of party funds. Miss Sturgeon was arrested months later in relation to the same probe, Operation Branch Form, as was former party treasurer Colin Beattie. They were both released without charge pending further inquiries. This year, Police Scotland has updated its media statement to suggest that its probe has concluded, though the Crown offices may be ongoing. Earlier this year, Miss Sturgeon announced that she and Mr Murrell had decided to end their marriage. The former SNP leader will release a book about her life and political career this summer. An article written by Xander Elliots. The National on Wednesday the 12th of March. Opinion. Keir Starmer is Margaret Thatcher 2.0, going after welfare funding. A column written by The Wee Ginger Doug. It seems that I, along with millions of other disabled people, owe Keir Starmer a huge debt of gratitude. Thank you, Sakir, for teaching me that I'm not, in fact, a disabled person who lives with challenging physical limitations, which make my life much more expensive, exhausting and difficult. I'm actually just a Workshire scrounger who needs to be harangued, bullied and threatened with penury and starvation, and being stripped of the assistance I need to travel outside my own home in order to force me into jobs that I'm physically incapable of doing. Jobs which don't exist in the real world, jobs which, even if they did exist, I couldn't get to without assistance. But hey, that's just the kind of quibbling you'd expect from a Workshire scrounger. I'd give Sakir a round of applause if I had 2 working hands, but then the only reason my formerly dominant hand and arm and left leg no longer work is because they've not been sufficiently browbeaten by the ghouls at the Department of Work and Pensions. Disability benefits exist because being disabled is expensive. In my case, I can't walk more than a few metres. I can't carry anything as I need my working hand for my walking stick. I lost my driving licence after the stroke, as I cannot drive even with an adapted car, as I have issues processing visual information in the left side of my field of vision, so I would be a danger on the road, both to myself and, more importantly, to other road users. Using public transport is challenging and difficult. I can't go anywhere without the journey being carefully planned in advance to ensure that there are no steps, stairs, steep hills, and that there are places to sit and rest. I use the mobility component of my personal independence payment for a Motability car. My husband is the insured and designated driver. Without it, I would be trapped at home. I need someone to accompany me in order to go shopping, as I can't carry anything. I can't do housework, prepare a meal, or even tie my own shoelaces. Food has to be cut up for me. I rely on my long-suffering and incredibly patient husband for all of this. If it were not for him, I would have to pay for carers to come in. I need to take a long hot bath every evening to help stave off muscle cramps and spasms and to help my circulation. Naturally, this means we have more expensive gas and electric bills. Everything takes longer and is more physically and mentally exhausting when you are disabled. People tell me that I'm doing great, but they don't realise the effort and energy it takes in order to accomplish tasks that were formerly simple. I used to be able to touch type before my stroke. I could type 1,000 words in 20 minutes quite easily. Now I peck away at the keyboard with one hand, and due to the visual processing issues previously mentioned, I constantly make typos involving keys on the left side of the keyboard. I often hit the S key instead of the A key. I'm not writing this because I want pity or sympathy. Generally, I prefer to keep the extent of my disability to myself, but disabled people are under attack by this Labour government, and it's important to talk about the reality of disabled lives. Every disabled person is unique, but in general terms, my experience is not unusual. The issues and additional expenses that I and millions of other disabled people face every day will not magically go away just because the government decides to crack down on disability benefits. Our lives will just become harder and more stressful. People will be forced into poverty. Some will be unable to deal with the additional stress and pressure, and it will worsen their health conditions. Some will find their already difficult lives become unbearable and will attempt suicide. Some will succeed. Their blood will be on the Labour Party's hands. The Disability Rights Organisation reports that according to official documentation, scores of deaths of claimants in the past 3 years have been linked to persistent systemic flaws in the way disability and sickness benefits are mismanaged by the Department for Work and Pensions. These new cuts and changes to the benefit system will make things even worse. People are going to die. Mr. Starmer will succeed in cutting the bill for disability benefits by killing off disabled people. Anas Sawa, who has a disability of his own, he's spineless, has of course said nothing at all about these cuts to disability and sickness benefits. No doubt he'll pop up once the dust has settled and he'll blame the Scottish Government, demanding that it mitigate the cuts. Personal independence payment, the main benefit for disabled people, has been replaced in Scotland by the adult disability payment, which has a different and more medically based approach to assessment. Yet cuts to disability benefits in England and Wales will have a knock-on effect in Scotland by reducing the block grant that Westminster pays annually to Holyrood, thus making it harder for the Scottish Government to maintain disability benefits at their current level and increase them in line with inflation. To their eternal disgrace, 5 Labour MPs from Scotland have written to the Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall to offer her their fulsome support in slashing disability benefits. They are Dunfermline and Dollar MP Graham Downey, East Renfrewshire's Blair McDougall, Coatbridge and Bellshill MP Frank McNally, Livingston MP Gregor Poynton, and East Kilbride and Straven MP Joni Reid. I'm not at all surprised to see Blair McDougall on that list. He was the director of 2014's Better Together, the author of the original Project Fear. He's made a career out of political coercion, menaces and intimidation. I did not have high expectations of Keir Starmer, but I did think that as a disabled person, at the very least, I would no longer live in terror of disability benefit cuts, as I did under the Tories. How wrong was that fond hope? Starmer is Thatcher 2.0. A column written by the Wee Ginger Doug. The National News on Wednesday the 12th of March. Safety risk if alcohol is sold at football grounds. An article written by Jane MacLeod. Allowing alcohol to be sold to fans at football grounds would bring an increased risk in relation to safety and public disorder, while there is uncertainty over whether clubs would make a profit, a report has found. Research by the University of Stirling looked at the possible impact of allowing the sale of alcohol more widely inside football grounds. Currently, alcohol is only available within hospitality areas and cannot be consumed while watching a match. The legislation was enacted in the 1980s in a bid to curb football-related violence and disorder. Documents last week showed that Police Scotland and the Scottish Professional Football League are open to discussions on lifting the ban. But the Stirling University study, based on research funded by the Scottish Football Association and the Scottish Professional Football League, concluded that permitting alcohol to be on general sale in football stadia brings increased risk in relation to fan safety and public disorder. The report said that this level of risk would be greatly dependent on the individual match and based on factors such as crowd size, category of match and the time of kick-off. It noted that the long-term effects of increasing the availability of alcohol and its links to increased consumption and health harms would be at odds with the Scottish Government's aims to reduce the societal normalisation of alcohol and reduce overall alcohol consumption, as laid out in its 2018 alcohol framework. The report also found that while lifting the ban could bring additional income for clubs, there is uncertainty over whether clubs would make any profit. It said that this was due to the considerable investment that would be needed for mitigation measures, such as crowd management, as well as meeting licensing standards and additional risk management criteria. First Minister John Swinney has already made clear that he is not sympathetic to allowing alcohol to be sold more widely at football games. Alison Douglas, Chief Executive of the charity Alcohol Focus Scotland, said, "This Scottish Football Association and Scottish Professional Football League funded study is an own goal. Far from making the case for lifting the alcohol ban in stadia, it surely kicks it into touch. Not only could making alcohol more available at matches increase risks to fan safety and public disorder, it would be a major step in the wrong direction when it comes to people's health. Increasing the availability of alcohol results in increased consumption, which translates to increased harm. This study shows that the case for changing the law to allow alcohol in Scottish football grounds would be weak at any time, but increasing availability of alcohol in the current context would be plain wrong." Dr. Richard Purvis, who led the research, said, "We conducted interviews with stakeholders involved in matchday safety, public health and alcohol licensing, and conducted site visits at various stadia in Scotland and England. Concerns were raised that increasing access to alcohol could lead to increased risk of violence and disorder, encourage higher levels of drinking and further embed alcohol as a normal part of football culture. One of the biggest concerns was how this could affect children and young fans, exposing them to more drinking and alcohol marketing at matches. With football already closely linked to alcohol sponsorship and advertising, stakeholders stressed the need for caution before any changes are made to existing legislation. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, "We have no plans to change the ban on alcohol sales at Scottish football grounds. We will continue to engage with the football authorities, supporters groups and clubs on ways to enhance the fan experience." An article written by Jane MacLeod.
This is an article taken from the politics pages of The National, published on Wednesday, the 12th of March. It's written by Lucy Jackson. Scottish Labour MP hits out at his own party over welfare cuts. A Scottish Labour MP has hit out at his own party over plans to cut the welfare budget. It comes as Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall is set to unveil more than £6 billion in cuts to welfare, primarily through making it harder for people to get disability benefits, and cutting the rate of universal credit for those deemed unfit to work. The move has been widely criticised by opposition parties and charities, who have argued that the cuts will have catastrophic consequences for people with disabilities and long-term health issues. Criticism is also coming from within Labour, as Brian Leishman, the Scottish Labour MP for Alloa and Grangemouth, condemned his own party for slashing the welfare budget in order to boost defence spending. In a post on X, on Monday evening, Mr Leishman said, £6 billion cuts, and more austerity on disabled people, or taxing multi-millionaires. Investing in weapons of death and destruction, or providing aid to the world's poorest people. There's nothing tough about those choices. Let's build a caring country that looks after people. Former Scottish Labour MSP Neil Findlay hit out at the Scottish Labour MPs who joined the Get Britain Working Group. He wrote on X, "These 5 Labour MPs will never be allowed to shake this off. They might think it will get them noticed for future promotions, but their constituents who rely on disability payments because of ill health and disability will never forget." In a meeting with Labour MPs on Monday evening, Keir Starmer said that the UK government should not shrug our shoulders and look away from problems in the welfare system, which he described as indefensible. The Prime Minister said he was not afraid to take the big decisions to fix what is broken. He added, "This needs to be our offer to people up and down the country. If you can work, we will make work pay. If you need help, that safety net will be there for you." But this is the Labour Party. We believe in the dignity of work and we believe in the dignity of every worker. That article was written by Lucy Jackson.
This is from The National on Thursday 13th March 2025, from the comment section. Nicola Sturgeon paved the way for women and girls, by Kelly Given. Where do you even start with a legacy like that of Nicola Sturgeon? A parliamentarian since the inception of the Scottish Parliament in 1999, she's so synonymous with Scottish politics that it's hard to imagine the Scottish political landscape without her. There are few examples of her kind, I'd argue even globally, but certainly across these islands. Under her leadership, the SNP won every national election they fought by incredible margins. Margins other parties and even other SNP leaders could only ever have dreamt of. She drove the issue of Scottish independence to record heights of popularity, and even if her critics like to rejoice in the fact that she never took it over the line, she made being pro-independence mainstream in Scotland. When we do inevitably become an independent nation, Sturgeon will be acknowledged as one of the most influential figures in that chapter of our nation's history. Beyond fighting for our independence, she introduced a new Scottish social security system built around the Scottish Child Payment that to this day, 2 years on from her departure as First Minister, is still lifting children out of poverty. She oversaw the implementation of the Domestic Abuse Act, described as gold standard legislation that enshrined the protection of victims of domestic abuse in law and made psychological and controlling behaviour a crime. She introduced a new progressive income tax system where 52% of Scots pay less than elsewhere in the UK. And that is just a drop in the ocean. Scotland is fairer because Sturgeon was our First Minister. Argue with the wall if you disagree, but facts will remain facts. Now, don't get me wrong, those things are all wildly impressive. But for me, they come second when I reflect on Nicola's tenure. I was 16 the first time I met her, a story I've told many a time. I was dragged to a community hall in Galashiels by my yes-supporting mum who wanted to educate me on the advantages of Scottish independence after I dared to suggest that I might vote no. She thought I should at least hear both sides of the coin before I made my decision, and she was right. A panel discussion with Nicola and Christine Graham was apparently the perfect opportunity. Fresh out of a higher business management exam and being a moody 16-year-old with little interest in anything other than being with my friends, I couldn't have been less interested. I vividly remember sitting in that hall and listening to everything Nicola in particular was saying. She spoke directly to the young people in the room on multiple occasions, and it was the first time I had ever heard a politician do so in a way that wasn't patronising or that felt as though there was an ulterior motive. She just wanted us to participate. I felt seen and valued, and not just as a young person, but as a young woman even more so. Politics was, and still is, a much older men's club. It never felt like a space that I, a young woman with very little life experience, belonged or ever saw myself represented in. That night flipped that perception on its head for me. For the first time, politics was a space that I wasn't just welcome in, but I was encouraged to participate and be heard. I didn't need time served and life experience. Everything about it directly affected me and my future. My participation, and that of my peers, wasn't just something that might have been nice. It was an absolute necessity. I had always been somewhat of a rigid stalwart of fairness and equality. In hindsight, an autistic trait that undiagnosed me could never have identified. But I didn't have the tools to apply it to a hobby or map it as a viable career post-education until I did. I left that night convinced that independence was not only the best road to a fairer Scotland, it was the only one. 11 years later, that belief has not once so much as been shaken. I joined the SNP shortly after that night in Galashiels and started campaigning locally for independence. That August, I crashed higher modern studies, where my newfound passion was nurtured by the greatest teacher in the world, and it sent me on my way to where I am today. My entire adult life path was set in motion by a fire lit in my belly at a small community hub in the Borders. That September, I voted for the first time, and it was a big fat yes. Later that year, I went to a meeting of the SNP Youth Wing, Young Scots for Independence, or YSI. I sat next to a friendly-looking guy called Jack, who must have recognised that I was new to this and took me under his wing. His mum was a parliamentarian, so you might say he was well-versed. That day, the YSI was electing its new convener, and there was a woman running for the position. The most infectiously passionate, formidable being I had ever come across. She spoke powerfully about the participation of women in politics and how Sturgeon had also inspired her. She won the election, and we went on to spend the next few years travelling Scotland and Europe, campaigning for independence with young people from all corners of the country and others. She went on to become one of my best friends in the world, a title she still holds to this day. That is Nicola's defining impact on me. Policy is important, the way it makes people feel and how it trickles down into the reality of everyday people even more so. But Sturgeon was so much more than the job she was there to do. She paved the way for entire generations of women and girls, and it isn't hyperbolic to say so. Under her leadership, we had a place, and our voice mattered in a way many of us had never experienced before. She faced down the most insidious misogyny with a straight face, and in doing so, she taught women and girls everywhere that it needn't define us. That we too could rise above it, break through it, even dismantle it for good, not just in politics, but in life. That's what she meant to me and so many others. It will hurt to see her go, but her impact will be enduring in more ways than one. That article was by Kelly Given.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.